All right, so you've probably been tapping your card more and more lately. Maybe you've even like ditched your wallet altogether and are just using your phone.
Right.
But have you ever had like that little voice in the back of your head that kind of whispers and says, hold on, is this thing actually safe?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You're not the only one, let me tell you.
Not at all.
We've got some really interesting information here that digs deep into the security behind these contactless cards, looking at like how they actually work and sort of busting some of those myths wide open.
Yeah.
So think of this as like your personal security briefing on all things tap to pay.
Exactly. We've been diving into a pretty in-depth piece that really gets into those nagging questions we all have. Could someone be secretly reading my card from afar? What if a thief gets like a little too close for comfort in a crowd? And what's stopping someone from just going on a spending spree with small purchases if they swipe my card?
Right.
So our aim today is to like cut through all the noise and give you those straight facts so you can like actually feel confident about using this technology.
All right, so let's dive right into some of those worries. And I think a big one for a lot of people is the idea that you've got some like high-tech criminal with a long-range scanner just lurking around, scooping up your card details from across the street.
Right.
So according to our source, this is flat out impossible.
Yeah.
And the reason why it comes down to the tech that powers these cards.
Right.
They communicate using something called NFC, which stands for Near Field Communication.
What's really key here is that NFC operates on a very specific frequency. Much like your Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, but at a much, much shorter range.
Okay.
So think of it like trying to eavesdrop on a really quiet conversation. You have to be practically face-to-face to even hear anything.
Right.
And contactless cards work in a similar way. The reader has to be extremely close to the card in order for them to actually communicate. And when I say extremely close, I mean the effective range is usually only a few centimeters.
Wow.
Nowhere near enough for those like crazy hacking scenarios you see in the movies.
So those stories you hear about people stealing your information from far away, that's
totally debunked. It just doesn't work that way because of the physics of how this NFC technology works.
So you can probably put away that fancy RFID blocking wallet.
Yeah, probably for the best.
At least for that particular fear, according to this information at least.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about another thing that worries people. Short-range skimming in crowded places.
Oh, yeah.
The idea that someone could have like a hidden NFC reader, maybe disguised as something else, or even just a smartphone, and they just brush past you in a busy crowd,
right.
And they secretly clone your card or grab enough info for online shopping.
Yeah, you hear about that a lot.
What does our source say about that?
So the source is pretty clear about this. Cloning a contactless card using just a standard hidden NFC reader, like a smartphone, is basically impossible. And even if someone could sneakily read your card up close, they wouldn't get enough usable data to actually make online purchases. There's a really critical piece to this puzzle here. Only legitimate point of sale, or POS, terminals, the ones that you see in stores and that are authorized by banks, can actually complete a transaction with your card.
So it's not just any device that can interact with these cards?
Nope, not at all. Think of these POS terminals as like verified and trusted devices within the whole banking network.
Okay.
They have the right credentials to talk to your card securely, unlike just some random unverified reader someone might try to use.
Right.
Any transaction attempted through an unauthorized reader simply wouldn't be recognized by the system.
Makes sense.
It'd be like trying to pay with Monopoly money at a store. It's just not going to work.
Right.
And on top of that, even if a transaction somehow did manage to slip through on a real POS terminal fraudulently, the banks and payment networks have sophisticated systems to track and flag any suspicious activity. It's like trying to use a counterfeit key. It won't fit the lock, and even if it somehow did, alarms would be going off all over the place.
So there's like a whole security infrastructure behind the scenes.
Exactly.
It's not just the card itself, but the whole network is designed to prevent unauthorized use.
That's right.
Okay, let's move on to another big myth that people worry about. The fear that if a thief steals your contactless card, they can go on a crazy shopping spree, making small purchases without ever needing a PIN.
Oh, I've definitely heard that one.
That sounds like a legitimate concern for a lot of folks out there.
It is a common one, and the source addresses it head on. You see, while it's true that for small contactless transactions you usually don't need a PIN,
Yeah, for convenience.
Yeah, for speed and convenience, exactly. But there are limits in place to prevent this kind of unlimited spending.
Oh, okay.
The number of contactless transactions you can actually make in a row without a PIN is limited.
So it's not just an endless free-for-all.
No, once you hit that limit, the card will automatically require you to do a chip-in-PIN transaction before you can tap again.
Ah, so it forces a more secure verification at that point.
Precisely. It's like a digital leash to prevent that kind of abuse.
That's pretty smart.
And here's another thing, and this is a big one. Most banks have policies to cover small amounts lost if your card is reported stolen.
Oh, wow.
So while having your card stolen is never fun,
Yeah, for sure.
the chances of someone actually racking up huge fraudulent charges through a bunch of small contactless payments is pretty slim thanks to these security measures.
So they've really thought this through in terms of balancing convenience with security.
Yeah, they've had to strike that balance carefully.
Those transaction limits sound like they play a key role in making that work.
For sure.
Are there any, downsides you can think of with these transaction limits?
Well, I guess if you were legitimately trying to make a lot of small purchases quickly, you might hit that limit and then have to use your PIN, which could be a little bit of a hassle, but, it's a small price to pay for that added security, wouldn't you say?
I think so, yeah.
Now, here's where things get really interesting.
Okay, lay it on me.
This goes beyond just debunking those common myths we've been talking about.
Right.
This is about the fundamental security built into these modern cards.
Okay.
We're not dealing with those old magnetic stripe cards anymore.
Right.
What we're looking at here is a whole different ballgame. EMV cards.
EMV cards.
Yeah, these contactless cards aren't just passively storing your information. They have a smart microprocessor chip inside them.
Like a little brain?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It's got a tiny computer that actively secures your credentials and uses some pretty fancy cryptography to protect all communication with the POS terminal.
Wow.
These chips are incredibly difficult, practically impossible to tamper with or clone.
So that makes EMV cards much more secure than those old magnetic stripes.
Oh yeah, a huge leap forward. It's like comparing a bicycle lock to a bank vault.
So it's not just about preventing someone from reading the information.
Right.
It's about making that information way harder to counterfeit or misuse.
Exactly. Think of it like this. That old magnetic stripe is like an open book. Anyone with the right reader could just copy the information.
Oh, yeah.
But the EMV chip is like a locked safe with super complicated combination that changes with every transaction.
That sounds pretty serious.
It is, and that brings us to another layer of security called dynamic data authentication, or DDA for short.
DDA, okay.
This might sound all techie and complicated, but the idea behind it is actually pretty straightforward and powerful.
Okay. Unpack that for us. What exactly is DDA and why is it so important for security?
Okay, so DDA uses public key cryptography, often RSA, which is a super secure way to encrypt things.
Okay.
Each EMV card has a unique pair of keys, like digital keys. So you have a public key and a private key.
All right.
And for every single transaction, the card uses its private key to generate a unique cryptographic code. Then the POS terminal uses the card's public key to check that the code is legitimate.
Got it.
And that the card is the real deal, just for that specific transaction.
Like a secret handshake that only those two can do.
Exactly. It happens every time you tap your card, just to make sure everything is on the up and up. And remember, this all happens wirelessly powered by that short-range signal from the terminal when your card is close enough.
That sounds super intricate, like a little security dance.
Yeah, it is.
What does all of this tell you about how secure the system really is?
I mean, it's not just one layer of security, it's multiple layers working together.
Right.
The short range keeps things contained, and then even within that close interaction, you have incredibly sophisticated encryption happening to make sure everything checks out.
Yeah, so it really seems like they designed this from the ground up with security as the top priority.
Absolutely. The fact that the authentication code is dynamic is a big deal.
Dynamic.
Meaning it changes all the time.
Right.
So even if someone somehow managed to steal the data from one specific transaction,
which is already very unlikely.
yes, super unlikely. But even then, that information would be completely useless for any future attempts.
Wow.
It's not like stealing a static password. It's a one-time, cryptographically secured handshake.
So what does all of this mean for our listener out there? Going about their day, tapping their card for coffee or at the grocery store.
Good question.
This information really gets at those common anxieties that people have about using these contactless payments.
For sure.
We've talked about the inherent limitations of NFC, the short range.
Yeah.
Then there's the incredibly secure EMV chip technology, the dynamic encryption,
Right.
and those built-in transaction limits, all working together to make those scary scenarios of contactless pickpocketing and fraud
Yeah.
highly, highly unlikely.
Very unlikely, according to the source.
So hopefully you can all tap with a little more confidence now, knowing what's actually happening behind the scenes.
That's the goal.
To sum up this deep dive into contactless card security, it seems like this technology has safeguards built in that really address a lot of those initial concerns people had.
Absolutely.
It's this layered approach, from that short communication range to the dynamic encryption that protects each transaction and the limits on consecutive taps without a PIN. It paints a picture of a system designed with security top of mind.
It does. And this exploration into how contactless payments work shows us that many of those widespread fears and anxieties are, as the source puts it, closer to urban legends than actual risks.
Right.
The reality is that this is a much more secure system than many people might initially think.
It is. And here's a final thought for you to ponder. Considering how quickly payment technologies are always changing.
Oh, yeah.
From these ships to the digital wallets on our phones.
Yeah.
What could be that next big leap in security? Or that next paradigm shift in how we handle our everyday transactions?
It's a good question.
It's worth thinking about how understanding the current security measures that we've talked about today prepares us for those future innovations.
And all the new worries they might bring along with them.
Exactly.
That's always the way, isn't it?
It seems to be, but hopefully now you can tap a little bit more confidently knowing what's going on behind the scenes.
I hope so.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.